ocupar sus lugares.
Please take your seats. Thank you very much. I kindly request all the attendees to take your seats. Thank you very much. Let's continue with the panel, Situation of Information Systems and Guidelines for Digitalizing the Public Finance Systems. The moderator will be the General Accountant of Argentina, Cesar Sergio Duro La Falce. Good afternoon to everybody. First of all, I convey the cordial greetings from Argentina to all the attendees. I experienced three kinds of experiences for being here. Coming to this beautiful Mexico City that brings the history to the present, and meeting you with many friends, even though we have wrinkles on our faces, I'm very happy. And the new faces after a COVID pandemic. The third experience is the event that Ramón has also cooperated to do. And in order to have the presentations, that Ramón is a senior expert of the International Monetary Fund, and he has a lot of experience in the public sector of Spain. He has collaborated to all the focal events. So without further ado, I give you the floor. Thank you very much, Cesar. As we have thanked many people this morning, and because we are briefing time, I'm going directly to the presentation. Please tell me if you listen correctly, because I move from one place to another. This presentation follows the same line of the presentations that were given this morning about digitalization. And what I will try to explain is what is the kind of job that we are doing in the monetary fund to digitalize the practices in different governments. Okay, I will press this click in order to project the slide that I want you to see. Okay. Let me take my time, because all with the time adjustments, the presentation was going to take 30 minutes, but I don't know how long it will take now. Okay, let's go directly to the presentation. If we use technology, well, then that says the phrase, well, you will be solving any public finance problem. Well, you many times remember the systems, and many times you have heard that just by implementing a system, everything is not solved. We don't implement a correct concept. So we need to think on what problem and what technology to use, because if we put technology to the service of nothing, that will not work. Well, the phrase of the computer works alone, no. You need to press buttons, and even if there is artificial intelligence, you need to feed it up. So many times during the focal events or throughout many other conferences, we have been saying that on a slide that we can go back and forward, we can read. If you think that technology will solve your problems, then you don't understand the the technologies and you don't understand your problems. That is something that many years ago we repeated. If we want to implement something and we have a conceptual model, we cannot implement it. Well, if we don't have a concept, then we will have a problem that we didn't use before. So, when we ask what problem and what is the objective, is for the public financial system to be more sustainable, to reduce costs, put more beneficiaries, that is, put cost benefit, and also reduce expenditures from a bad management or to satisfy more users or to reduce a market failure. All of them are problems that we can find in public financial management systems. And these are problems that we will try to solve with technology. Okay, that is the motive. The digitalization of public financial systems must have a purpose. It is not just like a system. It is not to put a blockchain just for nothing. No, everything must have a reason. For example, the question is, what means in health a service that has been improved? And I put some examples. We will be reaching more users at a lower cost. We have reduced the corruption and increased the final users because we are now confirmed that the payments have been done to the correct person. So around those objectives, we can put all the problems around to reduce cost, to reduce waiting time, and to reduce nonsense expenditures. Here we can look for technological solutions and what will enable us to solve those problems in the public financial management. It can be big data that the Deputy Secretary talked about and the difference, the big data and in artificial intelligence or big data. That is a good example. Alerts from machine learning to alert on the budgeting agenda and the robot used to benefit the users as during the pandemic was done. And also to use acquisition platforms with an electronic platform and to reach a satisfaction level to be monitored with natural language. When we talk about natural language, there must not be typical words that we do not understand. No, there must be words that can be translated to the level of satisfaction of the user. All these can lead to an improved system. Why? Because we will be reducing the waiting time, the nonsense cost, and that is the objective that we try to meet and to which we need to apply the technological solution. And for that, we need to have a system. And having a system, what will it allow us in many times? Mainly when we have a public service provision that is large, that reaches a lot of users and has many processes. Well, what we try with this system is digitalize all those operations that, for example, Cesar was commenting to me of a book of the first Argentinian account balance statement. Today you can look at it and you can laugh because it's just simple items in columns. And just imagine now translating it to all the services given by the government to the citizens. We will not be capable. So, by having a system, it will allow us to have systematized budget ceilings, and that will optimize the budget resources. And also, it will allow us to have different digitalization in the transaction levels that will allow us to be more transparent when we are accountable and have more transparency in the funds, improve acquisitions, and also with our nephews, for example, that have not been able to be in the morning, and even in the afternoon they will not be with us. And so with the treasury account and the cash account, we'll be optimizing these accounts in the system and give different solutions to different users that otherwise will not be possible to reach, and also to have a systematized management of all the investments, allowing us to calculate cost of operations, and that is important when we talk about public investments, and optimize project solutions at different levels in the beginning, when we plan, and at the execution status. And also, as in other presentations have been mentioned in the morning, we will be having indicators and health goals, as for example, as we are putting it as an example. And it will allow us to have, by having good definition of indicators and targets, it will allow us to have a good report and tell how we are providing that service and how can we improve it. This is only a map that tell us what is doing the fiscal department in the different financial management information systems. Well, in Latin America, it's present, and that I love, because that is something that when I see and I travel through countries, I can see it. And also in many visits and many visions, we try to analyze how are the systems. Well, if we analyze the budget, we dedicate certain time how are the systems being run, because from there we can find different solutions or similar solutions. After giving this brief introduction, the presentation per se, I will be focused on a GovTech, or a technical government. It can be translated like that, and the management of public finances. And I'm translating it because I'm the first one that, since I was in the fund, I have been using a lot of acronyms. And many people, when they see GFP, they can think on Grand Peaks or Grand something else. And so, I don't know, we are having that bad habit of using acronyms, so many presentations cannot be understood. And so, if there is an acronym you don't understand, please tell me. And we need to see the present and future and the role of digitalization in public management. And also, in a very schematic way, we need to see the guidelines to digitalize the public finances guidelines that try to select a great priority of public finances and stratify it in levels to see the different requirements in each one of them in order to digitalize them. Okay. The management of public finances, it can be seen in two ways: supported or transformed by technology. Supported, what does it mean? That it can support processes and improve processes and efficiency and productivity, but it can support the adoption of frameworks and functions in the public finances. It is something that we use in all our countries, but maybe not at all government levels. And there are questions, as for example, said in the morning, data. It is not easy to reconcile them. Then you will have to exert more effort. But it will be easier if you have account differences, treasury different accounts, and that will enable us through technology, by updating technology and transform them. And there, I have been focusing many presentations of the morning. We need to think again and redefine which are the processes, and being open to the possibility of using different technologies, digital technologies, data. As the Deputy Secretary was saying, they use tax declaration, and then they were asking which data do we need, because maybe there are a lot of data we do not need. And they've put different data sets, as we said in the morning, in relation to the system, to the information system. When we talk about, for example, in this slide, when we talk about internal and external users, there must not be just only external users.
Normally, when we provide a service, we know it's a chain. There's a dot, there's a point. We can have the officers of the Ministry and Finances, government officials, and others, and users who are external. You see, in the Ministry of Finances, the government officials are structured. It's a cross-crop analysis of the entity. Now, for us to provide a service, a good service, we all know. We know the words, the terminology, there's bottlenecks. Yes, when providing a service in English, there's loopholes. These loops, we're just tied to those loopholes. We're going around in circles. We're not out of it. We go supply data, and we need that to be sealed, stamped, and another document is asked of us. If a process is not well defined, it doesn't work, right? What happens with this? All the processes that are defined, that are not well defined. When there's a crisis, it's accentuated. That's something that we see amidst the pandemic. We have some examples, and based on assumptions, we think in this case, I can go to the teller and I can identify myself. Just if you can't go to the teller window, then I have another problem, even bigger than the previous situation. All the operations which might be internal, leads us to speak about the users. There's users in the process, not all are external, and in government, there's cross-crop impact, and we affect all the ministries that are working in the services online. If the services provided are not well defined internally, there will be an impact, and it'll affect other layers of public entities like budget, social security entities, fiscal issues, and other areas will be affected. So, which are the examples of internal operations? Well, these internal operations, I think it was like a year ago, if I'm not mistaken, we had a hackathon in Costa Rica. And what we had as an example, or the problem, was the management of treasury and the payment system for social problems. In that hackathon, we developed a program, a prototype that cut down on installment times from 3 to 5 days or 24 hours. That's just an example. Okay, if we had a problem, in this case, we find the solution, and sometimes the solution based on this hackathon activity, the users of the data of the Ministry of Treasury and the government and might have ideas, and other parties involved can have ideas that are even better. So we have to be open to these type of solutions. The payments will happen using the electronic platform of the central bank, and the prototype is going to be implemented as part of the SB program, which is, I don't remember, I have no clue. But, I don't remember what SB was, but okay. When I drafted this slide, I did remember, but that's the problem of the acronyms. But anyway, it's not that relevant. That doesn't affect my presentation, but I know that I made some of you smile because I hadn't said that, Like right after lunch, this happens to me. It's like, Juan, you see, I've been part of the 8th, all the editions of Forum, and after lunch, this happens to me. I start being like your class clown. But no, I've spent a great time with all of you here, and I see you, and I know that what we can discuss here can also be a bit fun. We're so serious in our everyday life with our presentations. So let's just give us a bit of an edge and have some fun. With this slide, I share an example. Let's focus on the present and analyze the future. What do we have to consider when designing a system? Those of you who are veterans and have worked in Focal for a long time know that I like what's mirrored in these slides with this digital guidelines and that in which we have our thoughts. In a system, we have the main modules, the cores. And there's budget, core, accounting, treasury, exercise of the resources, and then the capacity of report generation. The reports are something that directly involve us. They're our core interests. Then we have auxiliary functions or duties, payroll, investment of public funds, procurement, these can be linked to the main modules or cores. If we don't have an interface that's correct, we have a problem because there's departments that work in isolation, and when they're isolated, it's not going to work. As Bianca said, and as I've said before, and as Alba also expressed in our presentation, I'd like to understand blockchain perfectly because right now I don't know how those two layers interact. I still have that gap there. But if I after this forum, I'm sure that I'm going to know exactly what it's about. So, if we'd have to design a system, developing a system is key when digitalizing and transforming public financing. I mean, we have these systems, right, that contain information. You have a list of functions. The original functions are data dumps or entering data with fiscal forecast, preparation of budget, execution of budget, treasury, debt management operations or transactions, accounting, including all the follow-up of financial transactions, asset management, and the reports of balances in our public sector. Those reports have been discussed this morning. We manage our liabilities and our assets. We need to understand the whole map. There is the segment of public investment management, budgets that are result-oriented in the improvement of the services that we lend, contributions or revenue services, and non-revenue. Then the intermediate functions would lead me to speak about monitoring what happens in the risks. We extrapolate. Transparency is another function, dissemination of information, GFPs, and internal audit. Now, well, what do we know based on experience? There's a lot of examples because there's examples in all our economies. Which are the main legacies of the implementation of systems in our countries, or IFMIS? I mean, these systems are totally integrated, right? Or originally, these systems had to completely integrate. We've seen that there's problems in the integration phases with the systems, and that's something that many countries are suffering. So, which are the disadvantages or challenges? The systems might be less efficient. The systems works in sequence with our main modules. And that's something that we've discussed. If it's not as efficient, if I want to tackle all the areas, in years, we have a lot of cases which set examples of reference. If I don't have a module, I don't have the payroll module in the system, it's an auxiliary system. And I think to connect the modules in the system, right? And pardon, I hope that my comment doesn't affect anyone, but don't be bothered by my comment. In many countries, they are still using a system. And in some economies, they need the whole system drafted, well-defined, and all the modules or cores that are defining it. And those systems, which are cumbersome, even monstrous, are not functional. They end up not functioning because after you review each process in the system, they're obsolete. They're no longer functional. If I pass the microphone around, I know that the economists who are present can express their experience. We rolled out a survey in 46 countries, and in that, the outputs were that there were malfunctions in the system's implementation to improve public finances. I mean, in that effort to digitalize, you can see the slide. The impacts on the reports, the accounting reports, there's problems on trying to generate bulk reports of timely and precise. There's a lack of integration between budgets, classifications, data wears absence, or there's absence of the capacity to scrutinize the accounting reports or accounting entries to detail. Number two, we're analyzing or monitoring the flows of cash and conciliation in financial institutions. That it's extremely important for the Treasury. Accounting conciliation is important, or else there's gaps. They converge. You see the accounting entries and conciliation process. So we think, why would the Undersecretary of Treasury brought the computer science experts? Because there are two disciplines, and you have to tackle or deal with the information with both disciplines. Treasury, internal control, weaknesses of management. You see, those are parts of the controls in Treasury and management of there's insufficient backup with information, with financial functions of government, with central bank and how entities interact, institutional coverage in the scope. Maybe in our scope, we don't provide what we need to provide to all the central government. I mean, it's just public sector. What's the IT platform or the technology software that we're using? Sometimes the license of the software has expired. There's limited hardware capacities or software, and sometimes the databases are obsolete. There's a low or lack of connectivity. It's telecom. I mean, I don't know how much time I've consumed from my participation, but I visited a specific country, and I visited the country to analyze their income, not public expenditure. And they asked me, we want to digitalize our invoicing process. And I thought, fine. And I told my colleagues from the other department of treasury, of management of this budget, and they asked me to help them out, and I gave them advice. And, I told them as a counterpart that I had no telecom or internet communication in the whole nation. And I asked my counterpart, then you want to have your invoices electronically created? Your citizenship have to send the invoice electronically. You either implement the right telecom technology that could lead you to do that with a pen drive. And then the counterpart selected their solution. So we have to consider other issues that are not in control of the ministry, but in control of external factors. We think about the capacity to have compatible data and operate with systems in compatibility. We can share information with other systems. We can have revenue of income, management of debt, public procurement. I mean, there's changes. We, between systems, can share data with the same path. So which are the main problems? We could say that you can cast your votes now. I don't know, we expect your digital votes. You have to cast them. But if you had to vote, just raise your hands here. You have to select maximum of, there's 3 options. There's the conceptual design. Do you think that would be a failure in your countries? Somebody would raise their hand. Somebody dares raise their hands. Nobody has a gap in their design, conceptual design. Okay, a poor definition of the functional requirements of the scope. It's either on your side of the court or it's on the computer science expert field to define the functions. Automatization of processes which are inefficient at the workplace. We all complain the process was not well defined. Then later on you have to go through a change request. There's a lack of parameters when trying to build commercial solutions. This is like a Ferrari. They sell a system that's a Ferrari that can do everything for the user. When you have it all, okay, I want all the accrued numbers, the amounts, and the accrued data for the government. Oh, and then they say, no, we don't have the capacity. You can have the accrued data in another part of the system. So the parameters sometimes are not sufficient for commercial solutions. There's also shortcuts. The system must work, and it should be efficient and work timely, just up and running. If the system is not up and running and functioning, the kickoff or go live of the system could be today. And if it's not functioning, then we have to patch it, analyze the bugs in it, and fix it. I mean, there's gaps when trying to modernize and lead our efforts to basic process. Part of the conceptual design of a system leads us to understand that there's a modules of statistics, balances, data sheets, spreadsheets, the reports, the financial reports that date back to 2014, 15, and so on. There's other problems. There's substantial delays in the implementation case and overhead costs. And all of these problems happen because of all of the above mentioned. Since you don't have one of these, then we don't have to worry, right? And that's why we have to write down the guidelines towards that transformation in the digitalization of public finances. What's the objective of these guidelines? I know that first we have to specify the objective. It's in my heart. It's here. The objective, and these guidelines give us reinforcement, support to digitalize our government management. We have to build the right architecture and build a system based on computer science that has to support the functionalities with professional perspective in that scope. We have to bridge understandings between departments with the use of technology in the Ministry of Finances, the final user of this, and the external parties and the citizenship and other stakeholders such as the developers. You see, we have to create those bridges between stakeholders, whether they're internal, external, ministries, departments, or the structure. And then there's scrutiny. We have to shed light on the main capacities. It's the quality of it. The objectives that we have is we have to aim to really build a modern system. There's a lot of literature. There's a lot of documents in the Inter-American Development Bank and in the fund as well. There's different documents, and we have to operate and digitalize all our processes, and we have to manage change accordingly. When we have to administrate change in correlation to the use of a system, we have to build a robust process that lives in our system. They're working hand in hand, but we don't have the capacity to do that yet. But if we know why we're building the system, we have to understand who's the end user. It's the who, which are the functional attributes of the system, what it should have. That's basic for a systems architecture. I mean, the decision makers need to have those basic attributes. In top management, you see the levels. I mean, I wanted to give you the heading of my slide. This is basic for policymakers, the legislative branch, and high-level officials in finances in the ministry. And what level of detail or maturity do I need to achieve for the right function of these elements that help us in public finances? The level of maturity is correlated to those users who are responsible in the operation or back office in the different phases, whether it's implementation or operation phase of things. There's top government officials that use this data. The Ministry of Treasury has a thorough structure, and each process impacts other departments. The procurement department is involved, government IT units, auditors, committees, budget committees, the legislatures, institutions, which are financial institutions, and any other stakeholder that's in other fields and development. With this slide, I want to show you the main attributes or features of the functionalities in the systems for the digital efforts in government. We need to be capable of capturing data fast and thoroughly. The processing and data control should happen automatically. The controls are automatic. It should be embedded in the process in the system. We have to continue compiling and storing data with structure, have the archives, and integrate data. The data should not be manipulated. The operation of the architecture should integrate between catalogs. We have to codify it to share data. For the decision-making process, what do we need? We need to obtain data timely, now, not 3 years later. We need to obtain proper parameters, reports, and analytical capacities. If you're accountants, you know that the system should generate financial reports. If you're just going to have a budget exercise report, precious. But the user will turn to the counterpart and say, that could be very good, but that's not what I asked you to give me. You need to have information that's transparent. It is very important. It should be published timely, open, to be of public domain. That public domain of the spread of the information should be progressively out in domain. Now, this slide has the main problems. The problems happen when we have to capture data, process it, control data, store it, structure it, and transparency. These are the core problems in the digital world of public finance and government. A corollary. The decision-making process is as good as the reliable data of the reports. If I have reliable data for the decision-making process, okay, I can commit a mistake, but I committed a mistake analyzing the correct information. If I don't have all the data, there might be gaps. I might decide upon matters deciding wrongfully, but it's because of the gap. Transparency. Transparency can only be as good as the data we've compiled. I can be transparent if I only have one piece of data, one set of data, and I show it to you, I'm transparent, but how transparent is that? I mean, well, in this slide, you can see how we've been working at the fund to develop these guidelines. The guidelines establish the maturity levels. There's the basic, intermediate, and advanced level. And there's many problems in the functional architecture that I've already been discussing with you. In my presentation, you can see the presentation. It's going to be there for you to check it out. We have to continue analyzing this. It's there for you. In this slide, we define the basic, intermediate, and advanced levels. Per level, you see in correlation, we have the levels of progress with the functionalities. This slide is something that you've already seen. It's the guidelines to digitalization with the functions. The same. In these guidelines, we're going to have descriptive concepts of the functions so it's clearly understood. Consider that these guidelines are here to help us all amidst the process of digitalization. So in these guidelines, you're going to find in the wording the concepts or definitions of the constructs. The problem that's being tackled, the processes that should be supported by the system that's developed, and the information that we need to dump in the system that will lead us to achieve our objective. We have to establish the tables with data of what's functional. You see in the columns what's functional, the functionalities of the systems, the main or key characteristics or features that are expected in a digital solution that's full-fledged, and we establish all the functions in the different columns, just as an example for you, because this leads us to improve the exercise of the budget, the services given by government, and other objectives are there. Those are the functions. For capturing or compiling data, we know what we require for the basic, intermediate, and advanced levels. This is another matrix of data, just as an example. Here you have the commitments and budget in correlation to processing and controls. Here in this slide, you see the data storage, the type of data, how they're structured. I think, I replicated that column, but okay. Now I'll go to the next slide. Simply, these are just examples. Now we're going to go to the next slide. I think I finished my time. I think I'm a couple of extra minutes, okay? General attributes of the architecture of IT. The attributes, it's essential for it to be capable of adapting, oriented towards the future, pragmatic. It's a solution, a single solution, friendly for the users, and it's an open design. How are we going to draft the digitalization instruments? I hope with it by the next focal forum we finish them. We have to assess the situation, system by system, analyze the functions, and compare it to what we expect of the features of the guidelines. We have to draft roadmaps to support the digitalization process and transformation in the functions and create a standard to achieve the development in IT. So it's tailor-made or custom-made with an external party. The provider of the system has to be predefined so we can understand before the pros and cons of the developments. Here we have the São Tomé pilot project. In that process of digitalization, they faced problems and found solutions and implemented the solutions. They narrowed the gaps in their experience. This is the closure of the case. I thought that my presentation would be interactive, but if you asked about the experience amidst problems, you think, what's the experience in a problem? I think if I'm going to go through the same experience, then I'm going to have the same problem. But once again, I want to thank you for your full attention, and I hope that my participation has been of use for you. Thank you, Juan Ramón. Juan had forethought that he'd hire some mariachis to entertain us today, but the budget would be a bit greater for our forum. But we have 5 questions that are very interesting. We can answer those questions, and just succinctly, please. The first question: if you use technology and systems, we have automatic accounting entries. This has had impacts in the discipline of a professional accountant. So what will be the good question, great question. It's not a yes or no question, and I don't know how much time I have to respond. I want to answer just, I asked you questions during my presentation, and I thought, in bilateral. I think that question was posed this morning, right? During this morning's briefing, yeah? And I think it was a question for the undersecretary. I mean, that the undersecretary told us accountants that we have to be open. I've told you that as professionals, you are open. You bear knowledge, you bear information of your field. You have information that you feel is important. Transfer that information to the decision makers. Let them know what's happening. You accountants have to be open. I need to understand blockchain. I told you that because maybe understanding blockchain is a solution for your economies. And if you don't understand a solution, how are you going to take it into practice? I mean, you can be an expert. Maybe a payment or a transaction leads us to a transaction with the other account and the accrued amount. We can understand those entries, fine, but we have to understand other functions thoroughly at your level, because you have to analyze the general level, the conceptual definition of the system, and the processes, which are the requirement or the business requirements. Which do you consider are the advantages of digital transformation and public government finances? As reference, I'll speak. I just dropped the bottle. Sorry. I'll correlate my comment to the presentation. There's many. Just think about it. Think if you simply didn't have a system. That's my answer. Think about not having a system. Who should be responsible of defining business requirements and functional requirements of the system? You see me up here. You see all these gray hairs on this side and this side, correct? There's a lot of gray hairs, silver hairs here, right? Half of these gray hairs happened because I wanted to build an accounting informatics system, an IT system. And if the business requirements or the functional business requirements are left upon the other departments to decide, you have 2 problems. You don't have the system, and you don't have a solution to the problems. So you are the ones that need to define. It's like a major effort. The IT systems that develop the systems are very good when providing a IT solution, but their experience is in IT. They don't bear the knowledge that you have for them to develop that. I mean, I was about to give you kids, but then if I do that, then our audience is going to think whatever they're going to think. But, it's a joke. But, it's an in-house developed system, or would you go to the market to buy the developer? Who asked this question in this audience? Raise your hands. It's an anonymous question then. Fine. If I had the response, I think that I wouldn't be here. I would be hired by the best IT company in the world, or maybe. It depends on each economy. It depends on each detected need. We have to define conceptually the systems definition. If I was told years and years ago what to do about this, I have my personal opinions and answers, but I'm not going to express them here. When we're drinking coffee together, I can give you an answer. There's functional solutions that can work for a country, and then there's functional solutions that are not applicable in another country. The response comes from your side. There's not one answer. If we build a system for the public sector, it's one system, okay? ask for those who are going to implement the system. I mean, drill down and ask them, question the counterpart. If somebody's going to develop an IT system, does the accountant in his discipline have to do something in the process, in the system, yes or no? Ask the developer, ask that party, because in that development, there's many stakeholders involved. When you have to implement any system, in that phase of implementation of a system, it's just a headache. That is demanding. Nobody's going to tell a professional in another department to leave his work, everyday work, to develop the system. So you're the leaders of accounting in different departments or come from different disciplines. So you have to ponder things. You want to build a system, you have to build the concept of the system from the initial stages as top. If not, it's not going to be functional for you later on. One last question. When you shared your presentation, I had thought about this, but somebody asked me, you develop a system, but for who? Who's the user? It's customer-centric, client-centric. What are we doing? In our field, you see what's happening, who does what, the role, the manager, the accountant, who is the end user of this, the citizenship. Our population is the final user of all the services. Think about things from the other side. I mean, of the story. Everything looks beautiful. We can be trained. We have reports, financial reports, being beautiful and efficient, timely. But for those reports to be of use, they should be instruments that we could all understand. That's part of the issue. I'm very happy to thank you. I'm happy for receiving your question. You've spoken about the fiscal transparency assessment reports there. And one of the layers or the questions in the assessment are correlated to the exercise of budget. There is a line in those questions about citizens' participation or the population's participation. At the end, a beautiful accountant report, it's beautiful, but if you're not an accountant, you might not understand the report. So, if there's a report, there's information that we receive for a decision-making process, for control, for the execution of things, you have to obtain information that's not so thorough. You might have another set of data that's unbundled, that's easily understood, but we've spoken about data warehouses. So you have warehoused information, it's there. You create your reports with all those parameters, but if you ask a user, any user, if you analyze profit and loss accounts or balance report, and we try to analyze the detail, we get lost. But if we ask for another payroll report, I don't have to go to the screen and see one item and another item. That helps a lot. That helps us build transparency because clear reports help us generate an understanding. Now, that's why we have an initiative. We're asking the Buenos Aires Dean of the university to have a credit or curriculum or a diploma for accountants to be part of these accreditations. We have to educate our citizenship. We have to educate our professionals in accounting. So training and education is a fundamental tool to improve our democracies and enable citizens' participation. Thank you. Thank you so much for your participation. Thank you all.